It was the early morning somewhere in the summer, 16 AD. Germanicus and his officers were preparing for the upcoming battle. The Roman commander hoped this battle would be a decisive one. If everything went well, his soldiers would avenge the Teutoburg disaster several years earlier. During that ambush, Roman officer and Cherusci chieftain Arminius betrayed Rome and destroyed 3 legions in an ambush. Ever since, he has been leading a rebellion from the north. As the soldiers marched forward towards the Germanic warriors, a pair of eyes peered onto the battlefield. It was Arminius and his Cherusci warriors hiding within the trees. They were waiting for the Romans to engage in battle. In the winter months of 15 to 16 AD, Germanicus worked tirelessly to replenish his ranks. Instead of returning to Rome, he remained at his winter quarters along the Rhine. Together with his senior officers, he planned a campaign that would reach deep into Germania's territory, with no other purpose but to force a final battle against Arminius. Germanicus attracted auxiliaries from the regions around the Rhine and received grain and animal shipments from Spain and Gaul. Caecina's withdrawal after the previous campaign season and the subsequent battle at Pontes Longi caused a significant dent in his troops. They lost approximately 1 in every 8 soldiers, not to mention other provinces struggling to adequately supply the costly campaigns. Pondering the strengths and weaknesses of earlier campaigns, Germanicus concluded logistics were the main detriment. Long marches exhausted his men, whereas the Germanic tribes felt comfortable hiding in forests, ambushing his columns, trekking through. Moreover, as had happened at Pontes Longi, baggage trains were an easy target for marauding warriors. A rather logical conclusion followed. Transporting his army by sea along the current-day Dutch coast meant a well-rested army could land in Upper Germania's heartland. However, one problem arose following this conclusion. He did not have any ships. So the remainder of the winter, his soldiers built a variety of 1,000 ships, clearing the dense birch and oak woodlands around Nijmegen. Besides constructing a massive fleet, they had other things going for them. Several high-profile defectors joined the Roman ranks. At the beginning of the campaigning season, 16 AD, the Roman fleet lay ready in loyal Batavi territory. The Batavi supplied a number of auxiliary troops before Germanicus sent out his fleet to sail north. He ordered several small army groups to take out potential troublemakers. He launched an expedition against the Chatti, rebuilt a structure his father erected decades earlier nearby the Teutoburg forest, and he relieved besieged fortresses close by the Rhine. Then the fleet embarked, sailing upstream to meet up with the advance force. The advance force built garrisoned outposts north of the Rhine, securing a lot of the territory. His fleet arrived after a while, providing him with even more soldiers and equipment. So when news reached Germanicus of a rebellion among the Angrivari, he didn't worry. Surely he would easily crush it. Part of his army sailed upstream the Weser River, disembarking in the troubled region. They swiftly crushed the uprising, plundering settlements as punishment. As a result, the rebellion did not spread, and Germanicus could finally focus on making inroads in the heartland of Germania. This also meant they entered Arminius' territory. Making it his priority to know what was going on in his territory, early on scouts informed Arminius of the large Roman army marching along the river banks. Taking a large band of warriors with him, he set out to meet the Romans for what he understood would be a decisive battle. As Arminius and his army massed along the east side of the river, they saw the large Roman army marching up north. Germanicus commanded 8 legions, augmented by auxiliary units. In total, the Roman army must have numbered at least 50,000 men. They set up camp near the riverbank. Arminius rode down the slope of the hill to the bank of the river, asking in Latin whether his brother was among the Romans. One man indeed left the Roman formation. It was his younger brother Flavus, who remained a loyal Roman soldier despite Arminius' rebellion. His face was marked with scars, and he lost an eye during earlier campaigns. When Arminius asked Flavus to join his rebellion, the meeting deteriorated into a shouting match. Reportedly, the Roman commander Stertinius had to hold Flavus back as he wanted to cross the river on his own to deal with his brother. The next morning, Germanicus sent a large cavalry contingent across a shallow part. Among them was Rome's Batavian cavalry commanded by its chieftain Geriovalda. To distract the enemy, they attacked the scattered warriors at the flanks. Meanwhile, in the back, Roman infantry began building bridges to cross the river. The fiercest combat erupted between the Batavi and the Cherusci, initially successful and forcing the warriors to retreat. Slowly but surely, the Batavi were cut off from the remaining cavalry. Arminius gave the warriors fighting the Batavi explicit orders to lure them. They feigned a retreat, pulling the ferociously fighting Batavi behind a hill and forest. Then warriors ambushed them from the woods. Missiles and rocks flew down on them, while men charged with their swords and clubs. The Batavi were surrounded. They put up a serious fight, and heavy casualties fell on both sides. The Batavi knew their only way to escape was to break through the warriors. They rallied in a circle and burst through the rear line of the warriors. As they broke through, Geriovalda and his horse were slain. Thanks to their tenacity and the Roman cavalry keeping other warriors at bay, the rest of the Batavi managed to retreat. As the cavalry retreated, the Roman army finished the bridges and crossed the Weser. They set up camp at the riverbank, close by the plain. That night, a deserter from Arminius' side informed Germanicus he should expect a nightly attack. So the commander upped the security around the camp. But Arminius broke off his planned night attack when he realized the Romans were on high alert. Instead, a group of horsemen traveled downhill to the rampart. Speaking fluent Latin, these men now yelled at the Romans within that if they were to defect, Arminius would richly reward them. The fact the man spoke Latin indicates several Romans already took this offer, but to Germanicus' relief, his legionaries took these suggestions as an insult. Instead, this offer was taken as a sign the Germans were weakening, morale actually increased. The following day, Germanicus deployed his army. He held a speech instilling strength and morale in his men. He reportedly saw 8 eagles fly over his legions, a good omen. Then he ordered his army forward towards Arminius' army. The majority of Germanic warriors awaited the Roman army on a plain. Arminius and the Cherusci were on higher ground, positioned on a moderate slope with the forest in their rear. Although their exact formations are unknown, the vanguard of the Roman army consisted of Gallic and Germanic auxiliaries, followed by dismounted archers. 4 legions, 2 cohorts of the Praetorian Guard, the cavalry, and Germanicus followed the auxiliaries. 4 more legions of light infantry and horse archers manned the rearguard. The Germanic warriors were the first to attack the Roman auxiliary vanguard. Ferocious combat commenced. Subsequently, the Roman cavalry broke out of the formation and charged the flanks and the rear of the Germanic warriors. As the fury was going on in the plain, several Cherusci on the hill broke rank against Arminius' orders. They charged downhill, attacking the flank of the Romans. Predictably, the auxiliary cavalry swerved and flanked these Cherusci warriors. They did not stand a chance. The counterattack was quick and brutal. The Roman army continued pushing back the warriors, and casualties on Arminius' side mounted. He had to act. He ordered his remaining men to charge into the Roman flank. He led the charge himself. The Cherusci heavily impacted the auxiliary flank, initially making inroads. During the melee, Arminius was wounded. As more auxiliary heavy infantry joined the fight against the Cherusci, they began falling in disarray. Tacitus detailed the disintegration of Arminius' warriors in his writings. The enemy was slaughtered from the 5th hour of daylight to nightfall, and for 10 miles the ground was littered with corpses and weapons. The Cherusci were being pushed back from the hills. Arminius was conspicuous among them, striking out, and though wounded, sustained the fight with hand and voice. Before too long, the warriors were routed altogether. Arminius only managed to escape because he smeared his face with blood to avoid recognition. Some warriors, unfortunate enough to not reach the woodlands, could do nothing but run towards the Weser River. Tacitus writes, numbers were overwhelmed in an attempt to swim the Weser, at first by discharge of spears or the sweep of the current, later by the weight of the plunging masses and the collapse of the riverbanks. Some clambered to a refuge in the treetops and, while seeking cover among the branches, were shot down in derision by a body of archers. Others were brought down by the felling of trees. The Romans suffered very light casualties, but for now, the wounded Arminius escaped. Following the Battle of Idistaviso, the Romans celebrated their victory. Because Germanicus was the adopted son of Emperor Tiberius, the army held a parade in his honor. The battlefield lay littered with corpses and bits of weapons. The Romans used the weapons and wicker shields to create a mound with the names of the defeated tribes engraved in them. This mound had quite an adverse reaction, however. The sight of the trophy with the tribes' names enraged the warriors who survived. Although many of the battle survivors were preparing to leave their native lands and hide deep in the woods until the Romans left, they now organized among themselves once again. One more battle would follow, for Arminius and his allies felt the Romans overplayed their hand. This culminated in the Battle of the Angevarian Wall, the final battle between Rome and Arminius. Thank you very much for watching this video. If there's a topic, battle, or event you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also really like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 a month, you already gain access to exclusive Patreon videos and early access. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.